Kong's roar shook the very roots of the forest as he slammed his colossal fists against his chest, the vibration shooting through the soil like thunder calling thunder. Before him towered the mighty Cobra of Akanta, a serpent so enormous its hood spread wider than the crowns of the ancient Iroko trees. Its scales shimmered like wet obsidian as it slid out from the rocky passage, hissing a sound that warped the air itself. The African warriors of Akanta, painted in ochre and armed with long spears, formed a circle behind Kong. Their voices trembled with fear, but their spirits burned with loyalty. They beat their spears against the earth, rhythmically, fiercely, chanting the name of the only creature powerful enough to defend them. Kong! 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 The cobra lifted its head high, the yellow of its eyes glowing like two burning suns. Then it struck, lunging forward with terrifying speed. Kong dodged sideways and charged, pounding the ground with each step until dust and leaves spiraled around him. He leaped, an impossible leap for any normal creature, and landed on the serpent's thick body. His massive hands clamped around the cobra's neck as the villagers gasped. The snake hissed violently, coiling around him, each wrap squeezing like iron bands trying to crush the life out of him. Kong growled, muscles bulging, his fur matted with sweat. He wrestled the creature, biting its flesh savagely, tearing scales off as the cobra tightened his hold. The villagers' chanting grew desperate as they witnessed the struggle. "Hold on, Kong! Fight, brother!" But even as they shouted, they were reminded of the miracle they were witnessing. For this gigantic gorilla, this guardian who fought like a god of war, had once been just a helpless baby abandoned in the wild. Many years ago, during the rainy season storms, a hunter named Otibo ventured deep into the forest after hearing strange cries. There, beneath a fallen tree, shaking and drenched, lay a tiny baby gorilla no bigger than a toddler. Its mother was nowhere to be found, only footprints of poachers and drops of blood painted the ground. Otibo knelt beside the trembling creature, his heart tightening. He had 2 children of his own, yet something about the baby gorilla touched him deeply, as though fate itself placed the little one in his path. "Shh! You're safe now," Otibo whispered, lifting the baby gently into his arms. The baby gorilla wrapped its small fingers around Otibo's wrist, holding on with surprising trust. From that moment, Otibo knew he could not leave him behind. He carried the baby back to Akanta Village, where the people gathered in amazement. They expected the creature to be wild, destructive, but instead he curled against Otibo's chest like a child seeking warmth.
Days became months, months became years. The villagers named him Kong, meaning strength that grows. And grow he did. Kong learned the drums before he understood danger. He followed children around the village, letting them climb over him like a living hill. He sat beside cooking fires, snatching roasted plantains from old women who scolded him lovingly. He chased goats, played with dogs, and slept with his giant head resting in Otibo's lap. But as he grew, so did his size, first the height of a man, then the height of 2, until finally Kong could no longer fit inside the hunter's home. Instead of rejecting him, the villagers came together to build a special hut at the edge of Akanta, a hut large enough for him to stand and sleep comfortably, a hut decorated with tribal patterns, cowrie shells, and palm leaves, a sign that Kong was no longer just an animal. He was their son, their brother, their protector. Yet no one knew he would one day face a monster born of ancient curses. Back in the present, the cobra tightened its coils. Kong's breath strained. The villagers panicked as the serpent lifted Kong high above the ground like a trapped antelope. Dust swirled. Leaves tore from branches. Kong's eyes widened, not with fear, but with rising fury. His muscles expanded. He grabbed the cobra's spine with both hands and bellowed a roar so mighty it echoed across every hill around Akanta. The warriors struck their spears harder, louder, shaking the soil. "Kong, break it! Break it!" With a violent twist, Kong pulled. Bones cracked. The cobra shrieked, flinging its tail wildly. Kong pressed his feet into the earth and twisted again. The serpent's coils loosened. Kong lunged, biting deep into the cobra's neck, tearing a massive chunk of flesh. Dark blood splattered the grass. The cobra recoiled, weakening, but far from finished. The battle was far from over, for this was not just a fight between animals. It was the struggle of a family defending their own. It was the story of a gorilla who grew up among humans, now fighting as one of them. 2 months before Kong's fist struck the monstrous cobra in the heart of the forest, Akanta Village had been a place of laughter and drums. Children running along the riverbank, women frying yam by the roadside, and men sharpening spears for hunting. Life was peaceful, predictable, woven into a rhythm older than the mountains surrounding them. But that peace ended in a single night. It began with a scream heard deep within the forest, sharp, terrified, and then abruptly silent. The hunters who searched the next morning found the lifeless body of a young man named Omadu lying on a bed of crushed leaves. His eyes were wide open, frozen in fear, and 2 holes marked his neck. They resembled fang marks, but the spacing was impossibly wide, too wide for any snake known to the forest. Around his body, the leaves were burned in a strange circular pattern, as if something large had slithered with heat through the ground.
Days later, another villager was found near his hut, his body twisted unnaturally, with the same frightening marks. Children were kept inside, paths were deserted, and the night fires burned longer than usual. The elders gathered under the moonlight, whispering about spirits, curses, forgotten taboos, but no explanation felt complete, no answer comforting. Fear grew like a disease. Then came the worst day of all. A group of farmers went to the southern farmlands, hoping to gather enough yam before fear stopped the village entirely. As they worked, pushing hoes into the moist soil, the ground began to tremble. Birds scattered. The wind stilled. One of the farmers, Aroko, looked up and saw the grass splitting like water parting. Something enormous was rising. The giant cobra burst out from the bushes, its hood expanding like a dark sail, its eyes glowing gold, its body thicker than the trunk of an iroko tree. The farmers dropped their tools and ran. 3 sprinted through the rows of yam, but the snake's speed was horrifying. It lunged, striking one man, Dogo, lifting him into the air before slamming him into the soil with bone-crushing force. Dogo didn't rise again. 2 farmers survived, tumbling into the village screaming and panting, their faces pale. "The spirit snake," one cried. "It killed Dogo. It comes from the cursed rocks." The elders gathered, trembling. The spacing of the fangs now made sense. This was no ordinary serpent. This was a creature born of dark power, something twisted into life by ancient curses or forbidden rituals. The villagers looked toward the giant hut at the edge of the village. Kong stood there, and Kong understood. He had eaten from these farms, grown with these children, laughed with these people. Akanta was not just a village, it was his home. And a home must be defended. When the next tremor shook the forest, Kong did not hesitate. He rose to his full height, his massive shadow stretching across the huts, and marched into the wilderness, pounding his chest in a vow of protection. Now, in the present moment, that vow ignited every motion in his colossal body. The cobra's tail lashed against the ground, shattering rocks and uprooting grass. Kong tightened his hold, his muscles bulging like mountains ready to split. He stretched the snake's body, pulling it open with a strength few creatures on earth could match. He sank his teeth deeper into the serpent's flesh, tearing scales apart.
blood splattered trees. The villagers chanted louder, their hearts thundering in their chests. Kong! 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 The cobra hissed, its hood trembling, its strength fading. Yet it struck again, desperate, wrapping Kong's torso one final time, squeezing with brutal force. Kong let out a roar so thunderous the trees shook violently. With a burst of primal power, he slammed his fists into the cobra's skull. One blow, then another, each punch cracking bone, each strike echoing through the forest like war drums of the gods. The serpent's body convulsed, its massive frame losing strength. Kong lifted the cobra's head high and crashed it against the ground with a final earth-shaking impact. Silence. Leaves drifted, the dust settled, and the cobra lay motionless, defeated. Kong stood over its body, heaving, sweating, victorious. Then the chanting rose, soft at first, then wild, then unstoppable. Men and women rushed forward, spears raised in triumph. Kong, our brother! Kong, our savior! Kong, king of Akanta! Children danced around him. Old women wept tears of relief. Drums were beaten with frantic joy as the people of Akanta praised the one who had saved them from darkness. Kong, the once abandoned baby of the forest, stood tall among the people who had become his family. And the forest, shaken and echoing with victory, bowed quietly to its new legend. The victory celebration of Akanta echoed for days. Drums thundered into the night, dancers filled the square, and the people spoke of Kong with overflowing pride. Children reenacted his mighty roar, women recited songs of his bravery, and the elders declared that the gods themselves must have sent him to protect Akanta. In every corner of the village, one name filled the air like blessed incense. Kong! 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 But in the palace, behind carved wooden doors and golden cloth curtains, King Oregon sat alone, listening. Each time the villagers chanted Kong's name, the king's jaw tightened. Each praise for Kong felt like an insult to his throne. He had expected the people to celebrate him for leading the village through danger. But they didn't. They celebrated Kong. They worshipped Kong. And Oregon, who had always been the greatest in Akanta, felt himself shrinking in the shadow of a giant gorilla. That creature, he muttered, gripping his staff. He steals their attention, their loyalty, even their love. Jealousy is a quiet poison, and in the king's heart it began to spread. One night, under the glow of the moon, the king summoned 2 of his most loyal servants. They bowed low before him, unaware of the darkness in the king's eyes. "I will prepare a gift," the king whispered. "A special palm wine, sweet, strong, a drink of honor." The servants smiled, thinking it was a gesture of gratitude toward Kong. But then the king revealed a small clay pot sealed with black rope. "This," the king said, "you will mix into the wine." The servants froze. "My king," one dared to ask, "what is inside?" "Enough," the king replied sharply. "Do as I command." Fear swallowed their questions. They obeyed. The next morning, the servants approached Kong with large calabashes of wine decorated in cowrie shells. They bowed respectfully. "Our king sends this to you," one announced, "as a token of deep appreciation." Kong's eyes softened. Despite his enormous size, he trusted these people. After all, the village had embraced him since he was a helpless baby. He accepted the calabash with a heart wide open. The people cheered as Kong lifted the drink and gulped it down. Moments later, his massive body trembled. His hand dropped the calabash. His legs staggered. A confused, pained growl escaped his throat before his knees buckled like trees during a storm. "Kong!" Women screamed. Children cried. Warriors ran forward. But Kong had already collapsed, shaking the earth with the force of his fall. They gathered around him, shaking him, calling him, praying over him, but Kong did not move. The village fell silent, a silence more terrifying than the cobra's roar. The king, pretending to be shocked, knelt beside Kong with false tears on his cheeks. Our hero, gone too soon. But the villagers were inconsolable. They beat their chests, they wailed, they lit fires and kept vigil around his massive body. For 3 days and nights they mourned, believing their protector had died. Otibo, the hunter, who once rescued baby Kong, sat by his side, weeping like a man who had lost a son. On the morning of the 3rd day, as the sun rose quietly over the hills, Kong's fingers twitched. Otibo, half asleep, lifted his head slowly, thinking he imagined it. Then Kong's chest expanded. His eyes opened. Otibo screamed with disbelief and joy. "He lives! Kong lives!" The villagers rushed in from every corner of the village, crying and laughing as Kong sat up, confused but breathing. The poison had failed. Perhaps it was too weak to destroy a creature his size, or perhaps Kong possessed a natural immunity that no one understood. But as the villagers embraced him, relieved, Kong's eyes scanned their faces differently this time. The betrayal burned inside him. The servants who delivered the drink trembled in fear, unable to meet his gaze. Words were not needed. Kong understood. The betrayal came from the very heart of the village, from the throne, from the people he had protected, loved, and considered his family. The drums stopped that day. The air grew heavy. Kong stood slowly, towering above them all. His chest rose and fell with a mixture of sorrow and disappointment. For the first time since his childhood, he felt alone. Otibo held his hand on Kong's arm, tears flowing. "Please, my son, do not leave us." But Kong's eyes drifted toward the forest, toward the place he came from, toward the place where no one could poison him again. He turned without a sound. The villagers cried out, falling to their knees. Children stretched out their hands, women gasped, warriors lowered their spears in shame. Even those who had been innocent felt the weight of guilt crushing their hearts. Slowly, heavily, painfully, Kong walked away. One step, then another. His massive back fading between the tall trees. The forest swallowed him, and the last glimpse they saw was the sway of his dark fur, disappearing into shadow. And so Akanta lost its guardian, not to death, but to betrayal.